Welcome to science class. Today we are going to expand on Darwin's theory of natural selection. Darwin's main weakness behind his theory of natural selection was that he did not understand how heredity worked. Nobody in the world did until Gregor Mendel. But Darwin stated correctly that organisms vary from one another, and he stated correctly that the variation amongst organisms is heritable. But without a statistical understanding of characteristics or knowledge about DNA, the proof of the source of that variation lay hidden. But still, Darwin's ideas that different phenotypes have different rates of survivability was true. A famous case of this is the peppered moth in England. Peppered moths had most commonly been white in color to blend in with the trunks of local trees. But during the Industrial Revolution, when massive amounts of rather dirty coal were burned with little or no regulation, the forests began to be coated with black coal soot. This made white peppered moths stand out. However, a very minor genetic mutation in a single gene causes peppered moths to sometimes be dark gray in appearance. At first, the population would have been a majority white, with only a few scattered dark moths, which had always been the case. Dark-colored peppered moths existed, they were just very rare. However, over time, the statistical advantage of the survivability for the new phenotype changed the population. White moths no longer had adequate camouflage, and they were killed by predators in greater numbers. Meanwhile, the rare dark-peppered moths blended in, and now enjoyed the advantages previously held by white moths. The dark moths, on average, lived longer, reproduced more often, and left behind more offspring, who inherited their characteristics. Over time, the ratios flipped, and dark moths were vastly more common than white moths. This is natural selection in action. While it is true that the variation exists at the level of the individual, biologists typically speak about evolution in terms of the entire population, or gene pool. As the allele for dark color in moths became more common, we say the population as a whole evolved. There are countless other examples of this type of thing being observed in nature and in the fossil record. But this video won't be a list of one example after another. This video is going to be different. Instead of directly talking about how evolution works, instead I want to take the bad arguments that are made against evolution and explain why they are incorrect. That way we can kill two birds with one stone, debunking bad ideas and learning about evolution. Let's get started. I want to make one thing very clear. Proving evolution does not equal disproving God. That is not something I want you to be afraid of. Compared to other first world countries, the United States is almost dead last in accepting the theory of evolution. The United States is also by far one of the most religious first world countries in the world. But this is not a battle. The belief in God and the fact of evolution are not mutually exclusive. The primary author of the science textbook used by most high schools in America is Dr. Kenneth Miller, who knows that evolution is true and personally believes in Christianity. Okay, debunking time. The main problem with this question is that it's just flat out invalid. Evolutionary biologists don't make this claim. Only people who don't understand evolution make this claim. Humans did not come from chimpanzees. We share a common ancestor that was neither human nor chimpanzee. And we will use the analogy of dog breeding yet again. English bulldogs and American bulldogs are highly distinct, but they share a common pedigree. You take one American bulldog and one English bulldog, and at some point, they share a great, so on and so on grandparent, which didn't look like either of the modern types of bulldog. English bulldogs today do not, nor could they ever evolve into American bulldogs. Just like chimpanzees do not, nor could they ever give birth to a human being one day. We diverged on our own evolutionary pathway long ago. Furthermore, the question of why are there still chimps is erroneous because humans and chimpanzees occupy completely different niches. Grizzly bears and polar bears coexist in the same geographic region because they have different niches. Yes, humans certainly are animals. We are mammals. Modern placental mammals descend from a common ancestor and virtually all share key characteristics, which include 7 neck vertebrae, live birth, milk production, hair, 3 inner ear bones, a cerebral cortex, plus many other things. There is nothing fundamentally different about humans and animals. We are unique, but all animals are unique. And our uniqueness is not quite the impossible to believe it came from evolution thing you may think it is. And more on that later. I actually covered this in the last video. Theories are synonymous with fact. Now, some things can be virtually 100% known. The formula for water is H2O. It just is. The length of the hypotenuse on a right triangle is the square root of the sum of its 2 sides squared. It just flat out is. Now, do I know that the Earth is spherical and not flat? I've never been to space to confirm it. Direct observation is not required to prove an idea beyond reasonable doubt. Although some things we can't be 100% certain of, there's no limit to how close to 100% we can get. Evolution can be disproven, but so far, no idea has disproven it. And to be clear, many people claim that their idea disproves evolution, but a scientific theory must be disproven by applying the scientific method to it, not just by making claims. We can also flip this argument. I would wager all of the money I have that Bigfoot doesn't exist. That's how confident I am. Now, have I cut down every single tree in the world and combed through all of Earth's ecosystems? No, and I don't have to, because of the fact that there is zero evidence that Bigfoot actually exists. It's not that hard to make persuasive arguments, but evidence is vastly more persuasive. First of all, there are no other claims that can be verified objectively about this either. The Spider-Woman and Sun God myth has not been disproven, and it can't be disproven. But that doesn't mean it's therefore just as likely to be true. Second of all, evolution isn't even designed to answer this question. Evolution is the observation that life exists in the first place, and it evolves. But I would also argue that this argument is bad because it ignores basic facts. Living things are made of atoms, elements, and compounds. There's nothing that exists in any living thing that can be proven that isn't made of matter. 96% of you is made of the most common elements in the universe. Even for things which are pretty mysterious, such as our consciousness, that is clearly still the byproduct of our physical brains. There's no real evidence to the contrary. This argument is true, but it again makes a claim that scientists do not. Nobody would say that an organism as complex as a human being could have spontaneously appeared from natural processes. For that matter, not even a bacteria could have. But that's not what scientists claim happened. Evolution is a gradual process. The first cell would have been so simple that you may not even call it life. It was just a self-contained vessel where chemical reactions took place. All it has to do is become fractionally, unnoticeably more efficient, more complicated, or whatever every generation. And that is the definition of evolution. We can see gradual transformations in the fossil record. For example, the disappearance of hind limbs in whales and dolphins, the disappearance of teeth in birds, snakes lost all of their appendages, and then there's the gradual appearance of traits like the enlarged brain cases in humans and the modification of ichthyosaurs to a better suited body type for living in the ocean. Well, that's just flat out wrong. The mutation that caused the color change in moths helps the species continue to survive. That's beneficial. Antibiotic-resistant bacteria is another example. It's bad for us, but it ensures their survival. And the only reason they are able to survive is because of genetic differences brought about by mutations. While we are on the subject of mutation, there are some things to clarify. In the simplest terms, mutations that bring about changes in organisms are random, but natural selection is not random. That's one of the other arguments that is used against evolution. A random process could never have shaped life. While the mutations are caused by random events, the fact that those mutations allow organisms to survive or to be chosen by mates more often is not random. So the gradual change in the population is therefore not random either. I think this argument comes from a specific line of thinking. For one, these are people who can't get the idea out of their head that if evolution is true, it must have goals in mind. No, there are no goals. As I said before, if evolution did have goals, then creatures would not go extinct, because not going extinct is the only goal that a living thing really has. Secondly, natural selection doesn't select for intelligence. It doesn't do anything like that. Our intelligence is mostly just a byproduct of our other intrinsic characteristics. Think of it this way. It's beneficial for humans to be able to vocalize and make sounds, so we have adapted that ability, along with almost all other terrestrial vertebrates. And a byproduct of our ability to vocalize is the fact that we use language. But language is invented by us, and natural selection cannot favor language directly. What people who make this argument also don't seem to understand is that humans are not the apotheosis of evolution, but they want to think we are. This goes back thousands of years, and we've discussed it in other videos. I think yet another factor that leads people to argue this is they think we have reached some sort of goal or peak. Somewhere between 1/4 and 1/3 of Americans think the world will end in their lifetime. Like, the world will end. That kind of thinking leads people to conclude that this must be the pinnacle, but it isn't. We don't live at the end of history, we live in the middle of it. I want to talk more about intelligence and morality because this is actually pretty interesting. I said that natural selection doesn't select for intelligence. Natural selection is concerned with characteristics that make the organism more successful and better able to survive. Many studies suggest that general intelligence is really just a byproduct of social intelligence. Our ability to read facial expressions, our ability to cooperate, our ability to empathize, those are behavioral characteristics that natural selection can select for. We know for a fact that a person's grade point average or IQ are not good predictors of future success in life, happiness, the amount of money they earn, and so on. Charisma and social acceptance are far better predictors of those things. It may seem counterintuitive at first, but it makes sense if you think about it. As far as an innate sense of rationality or intelligence in humans, well, I'm sorry to say that that's misleading too. Humans are not as rational or moral as you think. Humans have culture, and we learn from each other and borrow from each other. The human race did not develop the concept of gravity. Isaac Newton did. One person out of billions. We tend to think that our species is collectively intelligent because we have so much information. But think of this. If we imagined a parallel Earth, which is identical in every way to this one, but the 1,000 greatest scientists, inventors, philosophers, and whatever never existed, do you think the human species would be just as successful on that Earth as they are on this one? My bet is they would be living a life somewhere between wild animal and cave dweller. The reason for the vast majority of the unnatural success we enjoy as a species is due to the work and discoveries of far less than 1% of all the people who ever lived. To be clear, I do think that Homo sapiens is the most intelligent species, but I think people drastically discount the role that culture and language play into that fact. And if humans are so rational and moral, then how come our past is so ugly? And I don't even mean the distant past. As recent as 1958, only 4% of people in America approved of marriage between blacks and whites. That's just unthinkable to us today, along with other ideas such as slavery. If we are so rational and moral, then how come we were so wrong in the past? I say that no, we actually have to learn right from wrong. It's not intrinsically within us. Anyways, I suppose that's as good of a place as any to end it. Next time, we are going to discuss how organisms adapt according to the selective pressures dealing with mating and reproduction. Thanks for watching.